Circumstances of life, we will never find the joy that lasts because the circumstances are always changing. If you let the approval or accusations of others be the deciding factor of your joy, you will never get there. Anchoring your joy in Jesus means this, guys. Pride will never go to your head, and despair will never break your heart. That's the kind of joy we need. In the 1800s, there was a Scottish pastor named George Matheson. And he was engaged to be married. But he began to notice that things were getting blurrier in his vision. Some of you with classes have experienced that shocking moment. Things are getting a little blurrier with my eyesight. And so he went to the doctor and found out it actually wasn't that his eyesight was getting worse. It was that he was actually going blind. And upon receiving this news, went back to his fiancée and shared the news. Hey, I'm actually going to be going blind. And she took off the ring and handed it back to him and said, I do not think I can take care of you for a lifetime. In the despair, in the shock, in the disappointment, probably even some in the anger, he was given two options. You were given two options. Do I anchor my joy in the always faithful, never changing Jesus of Nazareth, or in the circumstances of my life? He had a choice. And friends, you have a choice. And so as his eyesight faded him, he grabbed a pen, and on June 9th, 1882, he penned a great hymn that blesses us still today. And here's the lyrics of that. It says this: "Oh, love that will not let me go, I rest my wearied soul in thee." Where today do you need rest for your wearied soul? What I've learned is that life will leave you weary. Anyone weary today? Maybe you've learned that lesson too. And here's the thing: if we anchor our joy in the successes or the failures of life, we'll never find that joy. The successes will always be underwhelming because we will feel like, I just need the next victory, the next goal, the next whatever, and then I'll celebrate. But that never comes. It'll always be underwhelming. And on the other end, the failures will always be overwhelming. That we can kind of find ourselves in a place thinking we are only the sum of our worst moments in life. Or today, we can anchor our joy in Jesus, and He will become the stabilizing presence in the storms. Where have you tied your joy to a false anchor? Maybe you said something like, oh, if my career advances, if it goes forth, if my career is all that I hoped it will be, then I will know my life has meaning. If we can start a family soon. If I can get married, if I stay healthy, if my kids come back to Jesus, if I get into the right college, if I get the scholarship, if Bitcoin goes to $1 million. You thought it. Some of you have. I know you have. if I can get out of debt, if I can preach a really good sermon. It comes for us all, you know. Here's the question to ask yourself this week, if you're willing to go there. What is my joy anchored to? What's my joy anchored to? If you want a joy that nobody can steal, here's my challenge to you. Anchor your joy in Jesus. Second, celebrate in the mess. Celebrate in the middle of the mess. Here's the reality. You may already know this, but I'm just going to remind you again. Joy isn't found in the absence of problems. Because problems are going to be always waiting at the front door to meet you. Joy is found in the presence of Jesus. Look at verse 49 through 51. And the word of the Lord was spreading through the whole region, but the Jews incited the devout women of high standing and the leading men of the city, stirred up persecution against Paul and Barnabas, and drove them out of their district. But they shook off the dust from their feet against them and went to Iconium. Here's what's crazy. Paul and Barnabas are literally kicked out of the city. And it says at the very end, yet they were filled with joy and the Holy Spirit. Why? Because joy doesn't depend on perfect circumstances. It depends on knowing, is Jesus with me in the middle of this mess? Think about the mess of your life right now. Maybe it's a chaotic and hurried schedule, a struggling marriage, a parenting challenge. Joy does not mean pretending everything is fine. Please hear me on that. It means knowing Jesus is with you. He's with you. He's with you. He's saying, He's always by my side. He's with you in the chaos. This isn't the first time or the last time Paul is going to be dealing with this issue that I need to celebrate in the middle of the mess. Paul writes to the church in Philippi, and as he writes, he ends his letter to them. He says this: rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say, rejoice. Now, you may be thinking as you hear that from Paul, you may be thinking, sounds good, Paul, but you don't know my mess. You might be thinking, it must be nice for Paul, but I am overworked, overwhelmed, overcommitted, and just plain over it. Whatever it is. But Paul is not ending this letter to the Philippians with a platitude statement. Rejoice in the Lord, and again I say rejoice. He's not giving them a platitude that they could put on a coffee cup or put it on a t-shirt that you could sell on Amazon for $17.99, which is true. You can do that. It is available if you want that. Please hear me. Paul is not giving a platitude. He's giving you and I a promise. Promise. How do I know that? Well, Paul's not writing this letter to the Philippians from a sandals resort in Tahiti. He's writing to them from prison. He's writing to them from an awful, smelly, dirty, dark prison in Rome somewhere between 60 and 62 AD. This is why Philippians, this letter, is called a prison letter, because Paul wrote it to them from prison. Also keep in mind this, the prisons in the first century were not created like kind of our correctional facilities today in nature. If you ended up in prison in the first century, you were there for one reason. You were just waiting for your execution. That's the only reason you're there. And on top of this, historians believe that Paul was actually being held in what is now known as the Mamertine prison in Rome. This prison, how the prisoner was taken, they were taken in. It's a